Standing in the bathroom mirror of my new countryside dwelling, I brushed away happy tears that had traced paths down my aged face. At 69 years old, after 4.5 decades of matrimony and 2 years navigating widowhood, I had finally embarked on a venture solely for myself. This modest abode, with its promising garden and windows framing sweeping fields, was mine, utterly, unequivocally mine. My life's entire savings, $5,000 painstakingly accumulated through years of foregoing small indulgences, had been poured into this. It had been worthwhile, though. For the very first time, I possessed a haven, a place no one could possibly reclaim, a sanctuary where I could cultivate my cherished flowers, delve into my beloved books, and simply be in profound tranquility. I ran my fingers over the recently applied cream-hued paint on the wall, inhaling the fresh aroma of new timber, and experienced a sensation I hadn't felt in years: absolute liberty. Earlier that very morning, I had savored a simple breakfast in my compact kitchen, serenaded by the chirping of birds. I'd tended to the potted plants I'd acquired in town and mentally designated a spot for my favorite rocking chair. Everything felt perfect. Everything was mine. As I was arranging my few possessions in the master bedroom closet, the phone rang. Seeing my daughter Rebecca's name illuminate the screen, I smiled, anticipating a congratulatory call about my new acquisition, though I knew she had staunchly opposed this purchase from its inception. "Mom, it's such a waste of money," she had reiterated countless times. "You should remain in your apartment close to us." Close to them, not with them. Close so I'd be readily available for their needs. "Hello, my dear daughter," I replied, my voice imbued with that maternal affection that time and disappointment can never extinguish. "Mum, get ready. I'll be there in an hour with 20 of David's relatives," she announced, bypassing any pleasantries, her voice adopting an imperious tone that had emerged since her marriage. "Prepare food for everyone and get our rooms ready. We're only staying for a fortnight." The world seemed to lurch. I felt as if the very ground had shifted beneath me. My heart hammered against my ribs with such ferocity I feared it would breach my chest. 20 people, Rebecca. I'd only just arrived. I have absolutely nothing prepared. I don't even have food for them. "Mum, don't be so dramatic. They're your family now. You must host them properly. David mentioned his cousin Emily is bringing her 4 young children, his brother Noah with his wife and their twin offspring, and Aunts Carol and Beth are arriving with their respective families as well. It's holiday time, and they require a free accommodation. Your house is ideal." "But Rebecca, I can't possibly accommodate so many individuals. This is a modest 2-bedroom dwelling. Furthermore, there are no available beds." "We are your family. You have a duty to assist us. Besides, why did you purchase such a substantial house if not for us to utilize? Don't be so selfish, Mum. We're en route, so hurry and finalize everything. Oh, and ensure there are ample clean towels for all of them. The children will want to frolic in the lake, so prepare some sustenance for the journey back as well. See you." The call abruptly ended, just like that. I stood there, phone still clutched in my hand, the residual tremor a testament to my shock, watching all the joy I'd experienced mere moments before dissipate like ephemeral mist. 20 individuals descending upon my new home unannounced, without a word of inquiry about my capacity, my willingness, or my means to host them, and worse, discussing my house as if it were a complimentary family inn. I surveyed my small 2-bedroom, 1-bath residence. Where would 20 people find sleeping arrangements on the floor? In my living room, which barely contained a modest sofa, my refrigerator was practically barren. I possessed a meager collection of eggs, some milk, and a few tomatoes procured from town. How was I to feed 20 people with such provisions? With what funds would I procure provisions for a fortnight for such a multitude? Yet the most agonizing aspect was not the sheer impossibility of the logistical undertaking. What truly wounded me was the stark realization that my own preferences were once again utterly disregarded. My daughter had unilaterally made decisions for me. She had commandeered my residence, my time, my finances, as though I were merely an employee rather than her mother. As if this home, acquired through my diligent labor and every last penny of my savings, were a public hostel for her husband's extended family. I sank onto the edge of my new bed, the one I had selected with such care, envisioning the peaceful mornings I'd spend there immersed in my books, and a familiar hollowness began to bloom in my stomach. It was the same sensation that invariably accompanied Rebecca and her husband's visits to my former apartment. They would consume whatever provisions were available in my refrigerator, utilize my washing machine, watch my television, and depart, leaving everything in a state of disarray as if it were the most natural course of events. I vividly recalled the day immediately following my husband's funeral, when my need for emotional solace was most profound. Rebecca had appeared with empty cartons and a disingenuous smile. "Mum, you have far too many belongings. You must divest yourself of all this clutter," she had declared, briskly packing my late husband's books without seeking my consent. "We shall take these. You have no need for them. At your age, you do not read extensively." And I, overwhelmed by grief and confusion, had allowed her to abscond with half of my treasured memories, including the gold timepiece that had belonged to my father-in-law. When I opted to sell the apartment to acquire this house, she had persistently urged me to entrust the funds to her for more advantageous investment. "Mum, you lack a comprehensive understanding of financial matters. I possess the knowledge to ensure that capital appreciates," she had informed me with that infuriatingly patronizing smile. Upon my refusal, she had severed communication for an entire month, and now, on the very first day in my new dwelling, she was already asserting her prerogative to utilize it as if it were her own property. Tears welled and streamed down my cheeks as I gazed out the window at the garden I had so ardently longed to cultivate. Within the span of an hour, this profound quietude, this serenity, this sense of liberation would undoubtedly devolve into utter pandemonium. I remained seated on my bed for several minutes, struggling to process the recent turn of events. The silence of my new home, which moments before had felt so beautiful and tranquil, now seemed oppressive and foreboding. In less than an hour, this refuge, painstakingly constructed through immense personal sacrifice, was destined to transform into a hub of clamor and insistent demands. I slowly rose, feeling the full weight of my 69 years more acutely than ever before. My legs trembled subtly as I made my way to the kitchen, where I opened the refrigerator with a mixture of faint hope and growing despair. The reality within was even more stark than my memory had depicted. 3 eggs, half a gallon of milk, 2 tomatoes, a sliver of cheese purchased the previous day, and a bottle of water. That was the entirety of my provisions to sustain 20 individuals. With hands that shook, I opened the cupboards. A single can of beans, another of tuna, a partially used bag of rice, salt, pepper, and oil. I lacked even sufficient dinnerware. I had acquired a service for 4, presuming it would amply suffice for my solitary needs. The notion that my daughter would orchestrate the transformation of my home into a makeshift refugee camp for the extended family had never entered my mind. I glanced at the clock. 50 minutes to conjure a miracle. I retrieved my handbag and car keys, acutely aware that an immediate expedition to town was imperative to procure sustenance. However, a perusal of my wallet inflicted a further blow to my already beleaguered spirit. After settling the accounts for the residence, essential furnishings, and relocation expenses, a mere $300 remained until the commencement of the following month. How could I possibly procure nourishment for 20 individuals for a fortnight with such a pittance? The drive to town felt interminably long. Each passing minute represented a diminishing window of opportunity to prepare whatever meagre provisions I could manage. Within the confines of the small town supermarket, I navigated the aisles with the frenetic urgency of a desperate individual, mentally tallying every dollar expended. Rice, beans, pasta, tomato puree, a selection of inexpensive vegetables, bread. Nothing extravagant, nothing foraged for special occasions, merely basic sustenance to stretch across a large gathering. The final tally amounted to $240, nearly depleting my entire remaining capital. Upon my return home, a mere 20 minutes remained. 20 minutes to transmute my modest kitchen into an establishment capable of catering to an army. I ignited the stovetop to boil water for the rice and pasta. I unsealed cans with the fervor of a woman possessed. I meticulously chopped vegetables, tears streaming down my cheeks. These were not tears elicited by onions, but rather by an overwhelming surge of indignation, profound helplessness, and a deep-seated sorrow for the unfolding circumstances. As I engaged in the cooking process, my thoughts repeatedly returned to the trajectory that had led me to this precipice. Following my husband's demise, I had strived relentlessly to embody the quintessential mother, the understanding mother-in-law, the ever-available grandmother. When Rebecca required a babysitter, I was there. When she needed to borrow funds, I was present. When she wished to utilize my vehicle due to her own being under repair, I was at her disposal. Perpetually accessible, unfailingly willing, consistently acquiescing. I recalled an instance when David, my son-in-law, had materialized at my former residence with 3 companions, expecting me to prepare meals and provide refreshments for their entire weekend gathering centered around a football match. "My mother is out of town and you are such an accomplished cook," he had proclaimed with that insincere smile that invariably irked me. And I, as per custom, had rushed to the market, expended my own funds, and prepared a feast for them as if I were their personal chef. Then there was the occasion when Rebecca implored me to care for her sister-in-law's children due to a supposed family emergency. 3 young ones for an entire week, without a single cent of remuneration, without even a cursory inquiry into my own availability. When I pointed out the necessity of postponing my medical appointments to accommodate this request, she had retorted, "Oh, Mom, do cease being so dramatic. Besides, it will be beneficial for you to have a diversion to alleviate your solitude." Solitude? That word echoed in my mind as I stirred the tomato sauce. I experienced a profound sense of isolation amidst my own kin, a loneliness more acute than any I had felt when genuinely by myself. For true solitude is characterized by honesty. It does not feign affection while exploiting one's resources. The approaching sound of vehicles jolted me from my reverie. I peered through the window to witness 3 automobiles, disgorging individuals as if they were disembarking at an all-inclusive resort. Children's excited cries, adults' boisterous laughter, the dragging of suitcases from car trunks. And there stood Rebecca, orchestrating the entire scene with the air of the official proprietress of my home. "Mom!" she called from outside, "come assist us with the luggage." I remained rooted in my kitchen, still gripping the wooden spoon I had been using to stir the sauce, and a profound internal shift occurred. Not in a theatrical, cinematic fashion, but in a silent, irreversible manner, akin to the snapping of the most fragile thread bearing an excessive burden. I walked out of the kitchen and opened the front door. The spectacle that greeted me rendered me speechless. 20 individuals indeed, ranging from infants to the elderly, disembarking from vehicles as if they were arriving at their cherished vacation destination. Some were already attired in swimwear, others carried coolers brimming with beverages, and every single one of them regarded me with that expectant smile of someone anticipating being treated with utmost deference. "Aunt Mary!" exclaimed Emily, David's cousin, cradling a crying infant. "What a beautiful house! The children are going to be absolutely delighted here. I trust you've prepared an abundance of food, as we are quite famished from our journey." Noah, David's brother, approached, patting me on the shoulder with a familiarity usually reserved for old acquaintances. "Mother-in-law, this is perfect for a getaway. Is the meal ready? The children haven't eaten lunch." Of course, they hadn't partaken in lunch, for they were assured that Grandma Mary would be there to rectify all such oversights. As ever, functioning as the dependable employee who never utters a refusal. "Mom," Rebecca stated, approaching with a smile that failed to reach her eyes, "I trust you have arranged the sleeping quarters. Emily and her family will require the master suite, as the baby is prone to frequent nighttime crying, and we can occupy the other room. The remainder can make themselves comfortable in the living area." The master bedroom, my personal chamber, the room where I had just moments ago arranged my belongings, where I had envisioned awakening each morning to the garden view through the window. Without so much as a query, without any consultation, they had already decreed that I would be relegated to sleeping on the sofa in my own home. I observed these individuals encroaching upon my personal space, handling my possessions, discussing my dwelling as if it were their own, and for the first time in many years, I experienced a sensation distinct from passive acceptance. I detected a nascent, albeit genuine, flicker of something I had long since forgotten existed: indignation. However, I remained uncertain as to its ultimate purpose. "Mom, the meal," Rebecca commanded from the doorway, as though I were a server who had unduly delayed fulfilling an order. "The children are hungry, and the adults also wish to dine before we unpack." I retreated to the kitchen feeling like an automaton, acutely aware of the 20 pairs of eyes fixed upon my retreating form. On the stove, the rice had begun to adhere to the bottom of the pot. The pasta was bordering on overcooked, and the tomato sauce appeared considerably more diluted than I would have preferred. Nevertheless, it represented the extent of my culinary efforts, what I had managed to produce within the constrained time frame and limited financial resources at my disposal. I commenced plating, utilizing the few available dishes, fully aware of their insufficiency. Indeed, after serving 8 portions, I had exhausted my supply of plates. I was compelled to improvise, employing cups, bowls, and even the lid of a pot as a makeshift plate for one of the younger children. The humiliation was now absolute. "Is this all?" Noah inquired, scrutinizing his plate, which held a meager serving of rice and sauce. I had anticipated some form of protein, perhaps meat or chicken. "You do not possess anything else?" "You arrived with such abruptness, and I lacked sufficient time to—" I began to offer an explanation, but David interjected. "Mary, it is quite all right. We comprehend that you did not anticipate such a large contingent, but one might have exerted greater effort. We are family, are we not? Furthermore, this residence is exceptionally pleasant. You undoubtedly have savings to acquire superior provisions." Savings. If only they knew I had just expended nearly all that remained on the very meal they were now criticizing. Perhaps not. They would likely persist in their censure. David's family possessed a peculiar aptitude for inducing guilt irrespective of the prevailing circumstances. Grandma, a young boy, one of Noah's twins, approximately 8 years of age, inquired, "Do you possess video games similar to what my other grandparents have?" "No, my dear," I responded, striving to maintain the most gentle tone possible, attempting to suppress the rising tide of frustration directed towards an innocent child. There are no video games here. And cable television and Wi-Fi? He continued his line of questioning. Not yet, my darling. I have only recently taken up residence and have not yet established those services. The child regarded me with an expression that suggested I had confessed to residing in a subterranean cave. So, what shall we occupy ourselves with for the duration of our 2-week stay? This is becoming rather tedious. Emily, while in the process of changing her infant's diaper upon my dining room table, interjected into the conversation. Mary, it is imperative that you journey into town to procure diapers, formula, and baby sustenance. I neglected to pack an adequate supply for the entire fortnight. We also require sunscreen, insect repellent, and a few other miscellaneous items. She presented me with a hastily scribbled list on a napkin. Everything is itemized here. You can depart this afternoon. With trembling hands, I accepted the list. Diapers, formula, sunscreen, repellent, sanitary napkins, headache medication, aspirin, antacid, children's shampoo, antibacterial soap, laundry detergent. The list seemed to extend infinitely. I mentally calculated an additional outlay of at least $200. My final $200. Emily, I articulated, striving to maintain a composed demeanor, I do not currently have a substantial amount of discretionary funds available. I have only recently purchased the property and— Oh, Mary, she interrupted, her laughter dismissive. Do not be so melodramatic. These are merely essential items. It will not bankrupt you. Furthermore, it is for your family. I am certain you have some reserves for unforeseen circumstances. Unforeseen circumstances? They constituted my unforeseen circumstance, albeit not the kind I had anticipated. Paul, one of David's uncles, approached, a bottle of beer in his hand, a beverage he had procured from his own cooler. Fortunately, as I possessed no refreshments whatsoever. Mary, where may we store our provisions? We require space within the refrigerator for our beverages and foodstuffs. I opened my diminutive refrigerator, which was already reasonably stocked with the modest provisions I had acquired that morning. Well, you may relocate my belongings. Excellent, he declared, already commencing the process of removing my items to accommodate his own. And where is the chamber where Robert and I shall be sleeping? You only possess 2 rooms, and Rebecca mentioned— Do not concern yourself, I replied, my voice laced with a weariness that belied my efforts at cordiality. We can retire to the living room. Just ensure there are ample blankets and pillows. It tends to become rather chilly in the countryside during the evenings. Blankets and pillows for 20 individuals. I possess precisely 3 blankets and 4 pillows in the entirety of the house. My house, which was rapidly transforming into a charitable establishment. Meanwhile, the children had discovered my garden and were cavorting amongst the potted plants I had so lovingly arranged that very morning. I watched in dismay as one of them carelessly trampled my young tomato plants, which I had planted mere hours prior with such fervent optimism and excitement. Children, exercise caution, I called out from the window. Oh, leave them be, Noah retorted. They are merely children. They require the freedom to run and play. This is precisely why we have come to the country, so they may experience unbridled freedom. Unbridled freedom within my garden, decimating my plants while I bore the financial burden of their sustenance, effectively functioning as the hotel attendant for this entire assembly. Rebecca approached me as I diligently washed dishes in the small kitchen sink. Mom, I need to speak with you. David's family is exceedingly delighted to be here, but I believe you could make a more concerted effort to ensure they feel genuinely welcomed. I turned to face her, my hands dripping with soapy water. Make a more concerted effort. Yes, Mum. The provisions were rather basic, and the residence feels somewhat lacking in warmth, as though you are disinclined to have us here. Remember, this presents an invaluable opportunity for you to cultivate a deeper relationship with your son-in-law's relatives. You should express gratitude that they wish to spend time with you. Gratitude. That single word reverberated in my mind like a resounding slap. Gratitude that 20 people had invaded my sanctuary without invitation, consumed my resources, disparaged my culinary offerings, ravaged my garden, and treated me as their personal employee. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, I trust you have no intention of levying any charges for their accommodation. That would be exceedingly ungenerous of you. To charge them? The very notion had not even crossed my mind. But now that she had raised the subject, why indeed not? In any other establishment, they would be incurring charges of at least $100 per night per room. 20 individuals for a fortnight. That would amount to thousands of dollars. However, I remained silent. Not yet. I merely nodded and resumed washing the dishes, sensing that the nascent spark of indignation I had previously experienced was slowly but steadily intensifying within my chest. That night, whilst 20 individuals slumbered comfortably within the confines of my residence, I remained awake upon the diminutive sofa in the living room, listening to the symphony of snores emanating from various quarters, my gaze fixed upon the ceiling, pondering the precise moment at which I had relinquished command of my own existence. The answer materialized from the encompassing darkness. I had surrendered it incrementally. Every instance I had acquiesced when my heart urged refusal. Every time I had prioritized the needs of others above my own. Every occasion I had permitted them to treat me as though my time, my finances, and my personal space held no intrinsic value. Yet for the first time in an extended period, I also apprehended an additional truth. It was still possible to reclaim that dominion. I awoke at 5 in the morning, my back throbbing with an intense ache from my enforced slumber on the sofa. The tranquil silence of the pre-dawn hours persisted for a mere 30 seconds before the inevitable cacophony commenced. Emily's infant began to wail, rousing all the other children, who promptly initiated a whirlwind of running and shrieking throughout the house, their play resembling that of an amusement park. I extricated myself from the sofa, feeling the cumulative weight of my 69 years in every joint, and made my way to the kitchen to prepare coffee. I required a substantial infusion of caffeine to fortify myself for the ensuing onslaught. However, upon my arrival, I discovered Noah already present, rummaging through my refrigerator as if it were his personal larder. "Good morning, Mary," he greeted without looking up. "Where is the coffee?" "And we require milk for the children's cereal." "I do not have any cereal," I responded, endeavoring to maintain an even tone. "What do you mean you don't have cereal? What are the children expected to consume for breakfast then?" It was a genuine inquiry, and I possessed no truthful response. I lacked cereal. I lacked sufficient milk. I lacked adequate provisions of any description to sustain 20 individuals for a fortnight. My modest pantry was designed to accommodate a single individual who subsisted on simple, economical fare. "May I prepare scrambled eggs?" I proposed, aware that I possessed precisely 6 eggs remaining, a mere fraction of what was needed after yesterday's consumption. 6 eggs for 20 people? Noah scoffed. "We should really venture into town to procure some proper sustenance. But make haste, as the children will soon be famished. Let us proceed." This was presented as a shared decision, as if the funds were jointly owned, as if I had not just depleted my entire life savings the previous day on a meal they had subsequently criticized. Emily entered the kitchen, the infant cradled in her arms, a frown creasing her brow. "Mary," she began, her voice strained, "I need you to prepare some water to warm the baby's bottle, and while you're at it, could you please launder these garments?" The little one had a rather unfortunate incident last night. She presented me with a bulging bag of soiled linens, their aroma decidedly unpleasant. Didn't you pack sufficient attire for the baby? I inquired, a hint of exasperation in my tone. Yes, but I didn't anticipate such significant soiling, Emily replied. Besides, you possess a washing machine here, do you not? Wouldn't it be simpler to manage the laundry on site rather than transporting such a substantial volume? Simpler for her, certainly, but it meant more labour for me, increased expenditures on utilities, and the consumption of detergent. Just then, the younger members of the household began to materialize in the kitchen, much like a pack of ravenous wolves. 5 children, ranging in age from 4 to 12 years old, all clamoured for details about breakfast, each anticipating their doting grandmother's miraculous ability to conjure sustenance from thin air. "Grandma, I'm famished," the youngest girl declared, her innocent gaze piercing my heart. "It's hardly her fault she's in this predicament." "I understand, my dear. Let's see what culinary magic we can conjure," I responded, opening the conspicuously empty pantry cupboards and preparing to perform miracles. Robert ambled in, stifling a yawn and scratching his abdomen. "Mary, do you happen to have any coffee? And I'm not referring to that instant variety. I'm hoping for something a bit more refined. Decent coffee." I had barely roused myself from my own sofa after being displaced from my own bed, and he was already requesting gourmet brews. "I possess only instant coffee," I informed him. "Indeed?" he responded, a note of disbelief in his voice. "Well, I suppose we shall have to venture into town to procure some proper coffee as well. And while we're at it, we might as well acquire all the provisions we'll require for the duration of our stay." The use of "we," again, as if we were willing accomplices in this unfolding domestic drama. Rebecca descended the stairs from my bedroom, where she had apparently slept soundly in my bed, appearing remarkably refreshed. "Good morning, Mother. Is breakfast prepared? David is hungry and dislikes waiting." "Rebecca, I lack sufficient provisions for everyone. We discussed this yesterday. You must endeavour to be more organized. We are a party of 20 individuals. Spontaneity is not an option. Why don't you compile a comprehensive shopping list and proceed to town? We can remain here managing the household, tending to my abode while I deplete my funds, acquiring sustenance for you all." David materialized behind Rebecca, sporting that disingenuous smile I had come to recognize all too well. "Mother-in-law, good morning. I overheard you mentioning a trip to town. Might you be able to procure some cigarettes and beer for us? The current supply is unlikely to suffice for 2 weeks. We also require charcoal for a barbecue scheduled for tomorrow. Cigarettes, beer, charcoal." The tally of impending expenses continued to climb, and my meagre savings dwindled in proportion. "David, I neither smoke nor imbibe. I'm unfamiliar with specific brands." "Do not trouble yourself. Any brand will suffice. The primary objective is to ensure we have ample provisions for an enjoyable time. Enjoyment facilitated by my financial resources within my own domicile, whilst I functioned as their personal attendant." Paul joined the growing assembly in the kitchen. "Mary, last evening I conferred with Robert, and we conceived that a substantial barbecue for the entire family would be an excellent proposition. We could extend invitations to additional relatives residing in the vicinity. What are your thoughts on orchestrating such an event this weekend?" "More relatives?" I echoed, feeling a distinct rise in my blood pressure. "Indeed, we are a large and tightly knit family. It promises to be a delightful occasion. We simply require you to procure enough meat to accommodate approximately 30 individuals. Nothing overly extravagant." 30 individuals, meat for 30 people. I mentally calculated an additional expenditure of at least $500. funds I demonstrably did not possess. I doubt I can manage that, I stated. Oh, Mary, Emily interjected, do try not to be so parsimonious. It's a family reunion. Besides, considering the savings you're accumulating by not having to secure hotel accommodations for all of us, you surely can afford a barbecue. Not incurring hotel expenses, as if my home was a greatest lodging facility, as if my time, my personal space, and my peace of mind held no intrinsic value. Meanwhile, the children had discovered my limited supply of crackers and were consuming them directly from the packaging, leaving a trail of crumbs across my freshly cleaned kitchen floor. Children, cease that consumption immediately, I exclaimed. What are those crackers intended for, Mother? Rebecca inquired, her tone laced with annoyance. They are merely crackers. The children are hungry and you haven't prepared any breakfast. At the very least, allow them something to eat. Something, my crackers, my provisions, my absolute last food reserve in the house. Mother, Rebecca continued, I believe you are exhibiting a degree of selfishness. This represents a wonderful opportunity for familial cohesion, and you are merely lamenting trivial matters such as crackers and monetary concerns. Are you not delighted to witness our happiness? Happiness. They were content, spending my money, occupying my home, consuming my food, and treating me as their hired help. Of course they were happy. I stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by 20 individuals who regarded me as the antagonist in their narrative for failing to provide sustenance for them indefinitely, free of charge. And then something within me finally yielded. It wasn't a dramatic outburst. Rather, it was akin to a puzzle piece that had been misplaced for years, finally settling into its rightful position. Suddenly, the complete picture emerged with a surprising clarity. These people did not love me, they needed me. There existed a profound distinction between these two sentiments, a distinction I had erroneously blurred for countless years. It shall be quite all right, I announced, my voice imbued with a newfound calm that surprised even myself. I shall proceed to town to procure the necessary items. A chorus of satisfied smiles erupted, each individual convinced they had triumphed once more over the accommodating matriarch. Yet as I gathered my purse and car keys, my thoughts were far removed from culinary necessities or shopping itineraries. I was contemplating a far more significant matter. My mind turned to the law office I had noticed in town the preceding day, and to a discourse that perhaps it was time to initiate. For the first time in days, I departed my residence with a genuine smile gracing my lips. The excursion into town that morning proved to be the most liberating experience I had had in years. For the first time since my family's arrival, I found myself alone with my own thoughts, unburdened by any demands, the cacophony of screaming children and the incessant demands of adults treating me as their domestic staff, absent. The profound silence within the confines of my vehicle felt like a balm to my wounded spirit. However, my destination was not the supermarket, as they had anticipated. Instead, I parked before a quaint little cafe I had observed the previous day and settled in to savor a proper cup of coffee, allowing myself the time to organize my thoughts. I required a moment to process the profound realization that had dawned upon me that morning. Are you quite well, madam? The waitress inquired, a middle-aged woman with a benevolent countenance. You appear somewhat distressed, I replied with a melancholic smile. Suffice it to say, I am navigating a rather intricate familial situation. Ah, she responded, nodding with an understanding demeanor. Family, at times they are indeed the source of our deepest wounds, are they not? Her words struck me with the force of a lightning bolt. That was precisely it. My own family was inflicting the most profound pain upon me, and I had become so accustomed to the suffering that I had begun to perceive it as ordinary. Following my coffee, I meandered through the charming small town until I located my objective. Jeremy Stone, attorney at law. The signage was understated yet exuded professionalism. I drew a fortifying breath and stepped inside. "Good morning." A gentleman, approximately 50 years of age with a kindly visage, greeted me. "How may I be of assistance?" "I require legal counsel regarding matters of family," I stated, feeling a touch of absurdity, yet resolute in my purpose. Jeremy gestured for me to be seated and offered me a glass of water. Over the ensuing hour, I recounted the entire saga, from Rebecca's initial summons to the unsolicited invasion of my home, from the financial impositions levied upon me to the utter disregard for my property and my finances. The gentleman listened attentively, refraining from interruption, occasionally making notes. "Mrs. Albright," he finally declared, "what you are describing to me constitutes financial and emotional abuse. The fact that they are your relatives does not grant them the prerogative to utilize your property without consent or to coerce you into expending your personal funds on their behalf." "But they are my family," I murmured, inadvertently repeating the justification I had clung to for years. "True familial bonds are characterized by mutual respect, not exploitation," he stated firmly. "Have you ever contemplated establishing legal boundaries?" Legal boundaries? The concept seemed both foreign and profoundly liberating. "What form might these boundaries take?" I inquired. "Well, for instance, your residence is your private property. You possess the absolute right to dictate who may be present within its confines and under what conditions. Should an individual refuse to depart when requested, they are, by definition, trespassing. Trespassing, and on my own family, no less. Furthermore," Jeremy continued, "if a considerable number of individuals are availing themselves of your property as temporary lodging, legally you are entitled to levy charges for the services you are rendering, encompassing sustenance, accommodation, and essential utilities. In any hotel establishment, they would be incurring expenses amounting to hundreds of dollars for what you are providing gratuitously." "Might I truly impose charges?" I asked, experiencing a complex admixture of hope and apprehension. "Certainly, it is your domicile. These are your resources. If they elected to arrive unannounced and without financial contribution, you have every legal right to establish commercial terms for their sojourn." I departed Jeremy's office, clutching a folder laden with documentation and a significantly altered perspective on my predicament. I was now equipped with a formally drafted letter delineating commercial lodging arrangements for my property, complete with prescribed rates per room, per meal, and per service. Additionally, I possessed information regarding my rights as a homeowner and the legal recourse available should any individual refuse to adhere to my decisions. My subsequent destination was the bank. I was keen to ascertain the precise balance remaining in my account and the extent of my expenditures over the preceding 48 hours. The figures were, to put it mildly, alarming. In less than 2 days, I had depleted $520 from my modest savings. At this rate, financial insolvency would be a reality within a mere week. The bank manager, a young gentleman named Richard, reviewed my account with a visibly concerned expression. "Mrs. Albright, these expenditures are exceptionally high in relation to your typical income. Is everything proceeding as expected?" he inquired. I provided a concise overview of the situation, and he nodded in understanding. "Allow me to state, though it is not my purview, I have encountered analogous circumstances. Elderly individuals who permit themselves to be financially exploited by their relatives. Have you considered implementing spending constraints?" "I am beginning to," I replied. "If you require assistance in managing your expenditures or establishing a budget designed to safeguard you against inadvertent overspending, we can provide support. We can also configure your account to necessitate specific authorization for any transactions exceeding a predetermined sum. This presented another, previously unknown, avenue for self-protection, a means to shield myself from my own well-intentioned but ultimately detrimental generosity. Finally, I proceeded to the supermarket, but this time my purchases were strictly utilitarian. Rice, beans, vegetables, no indulgences, no cuts of meat for elaborate barbecues, no bottles of beer or packs of cigarettes. My total expenditure amounted to precisely $50. Upon my return home, approximately 3 hours later, I was met with a chorus of complaints. "Mother, your absence was interminable," Rebecca exclaimed. "The children are famished, and so are we. Where is the meat for the barbecue?" Paul inquired. "And the beer," David added. "The cigarettes," Robert insisted. I surveyed them all, assembled in my living room, within the confines of my home, each expecting me to resolve all their needs with my personal funds, and for the first time in years, I felt no compunction, no guilt. Instead, I experienced a profound sense of clarity. "I have acquired basic foodstuffs," I announced calmly. "Rice, beans, pasta, sufficient to prevent anyone from going hungry." "But what about all the items we requested?" Emily pressed. "I did not purchase them," I stated unequivocally. The ensuing silence was palpable. 20 individuals stared at me as if I had suddenly lost my sanity. "What do you mean you didn't purchase them?" Noah inquired, his voice laced with disbelief. "I do not possess the financial means to procure meat for 30 individuals, nor beer, nor cigarettes, nor any of the other items you specified. My funds are designated solely for essential provisions." "But mother," Rebecca intervened, her voice adopting that condescending tone I detested so intensely, "we are aware you have accumulated savings. Do not be so avaricious." I retrieved the documents I had obtained from the bank and presented them. "These are my bank statements. In the span of 2 days, I have expended $520 of my savings. I have less than $300 remaining until the end of the month. There are no hidden reserves, no secret stashes. This is the entirety of my available funds." The papers circulated from hand to hand, akin to evidence presented in a courtroom. The initial expressions of disbelief gradually morphed into visible annoyance. "Very well, then we shall need to explore alternative solutions," David declared at length. "We can all contribute towards the expenses." "An excellent proposition," I responded, retrieving another folder from my handbag. "As a matter of fact, I consulted with an attorney this morning and prepared a document formally establishing commercial rates for lodging at my residence." The silence descended once more, but this time it carried a different quality. It was the silence of individuals who had just grasped the undeniable reality that their erstwhile victim was no longer willing to submit to their will. "The charge is $100 per room per night," I continued, reading from the document, $50 per person per day for meals, and an additional $20 per day for essential services such as water, electricity, and laundry. Consequently, for the preceding 2 days, the accumulated total would amount to $2,800. One could have heard a pin drop. "You intend to charge us to remain in your home?" Rebecca exclaimed, her voice escalating into a shrill pitch. "No," I countered, maintaining a composure that was difficult to sustain. "I am offering you the option to compensate for the services you are presently receiving, or to seek alternative accommodation elsewhere." For the first time in years, I was unequivocally in command of the discourse. The ensuing eruption was nothing short of spectacular. 20 individuals engaged in a cacophony of simultaneous speech, their voices rising in protest, attempting to instill guilt through the very manipulative tactics they had honed over years of practice. However, a fundamental shift had occurred within me. It was as though an invisible barrier had been erected, preventing their emotionally charged words from penetrating my resolve. "This is preposterous," David boomed. "We are family. You cannot demand payment for our sojourn in your dwelling." "Since when have you become so acquisitive, mother?" Rebecca added, her eyes welling with feigned tears. "Father would be spinning in his grave were he to learn you are levying charges against his own kin." The mention of my late husband proved to be the final catalyst, though not in the manner she had intended. Rather than shattering me, it fortified my resolve. "Your father," I stated, my voice imbued with an unshakable firmness, dedicated his entire working life to ensuring my financial security. He would never have condoned his family treating me as a mere household servant within my own home. "We are not treating you as an employee," Emily protested. "We are providing you with the opportunity to spend time with your family." "Spend time?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Emily, since your arrival, you have compelled me to launder your infant's garments, to warm his bottles, and have demanded that I procure diapers and formula with my own funds. Is this what you term spending time?" "But we are family," she insisted. "That is what families do, is it not?" I replied, a clarity in my voice that astonished even myself. "What families do is demonstrate mutual respect, contribute equitably, and refrain from exploiting each other's generosity. What you are engaged in is outright exploitation." Noah approached, his demeanor decidedly menacing. "Mary, I believe you are becoming unhinged. Perhaps you require medical attention. This behavior is entirely out of character for you." "You are correct," I responded, unperturbed. This was not the me from before. The former Mary allowed herself to be trampled upon, squandered her savings on individuals who treated her with disdain and mistook being utilized for being cherished. However, that iteration of Mary no longer exists. "Mother, this is profoundly embarrassing," Rebecca cried out. "What will people think when they discover you have charged your own family for accommodation?" "The very same people who would think poorly of you for arriving uninvited at the residence of a 69-year-old woman and expecting her to provide for you gratis for a fortnight," I retorted. Paul adopted a different tactic. "Mary, let us approach this with a modicum of reason. We acknowledge your expenses, but these rates are utterly exorbitant. We would be willing to offer a token sum, perhaps $200 for the entire duration of our stay for everyone." Martha, mid-sip of her coffee, nearly choked. $200 for 20 individuals for a period of 2 weeks? The least expensive hotel in this town levies a charge of $60 per night per room. The mathematical reality was undeniable, and they were acutely aware of it. Yet my decision was irrevocably made. $200, I repeated slowly, as if contemplating the offer. Their faces were alight with expectation, a smug confidence suggesting they had once again orchestrated a win for themselves. Their proposition outlined accommodation for 20 individuals over 14 days, encompassing 3 meals daily, plus provisions for lodging, water, electricity, heating, and upkeep of their attire and living spaces. "Precisely," Rebecca declared with a flash of triumph. "You see, we're not unreasonable. We're eager to contribute." Martha's gaze met mine, carrying that knowing look only seasoned individuals possess when a positive turn of events is on the horizon. She grasped the entire situation with perfect clarity. "Very well," I finally conceded. "I accept your terms." A collective exhalation of relief swept through the room. They believed victory was theirs, but I continued, observing their expressions shift to one of stark disapproval as I introduced a singular stipulation. "Since this is now a business arrangement," I explained, I require you to sign a formal accommodation agreement. A contract? Noah queried, suspicion lacing his tone. Naturally, I responded, if you intend to compensate for services rendered, we must precisely define what those services entail and what falls outside their scope. This is to safeguard everyone involved. I produced the documents Jeremy had prepared and laid them upon the coffee table. This agreement stipulates that for $200, your entitlement includes sleeping on the living room floor, one basic sustenance a day, consisting of rice and beans, supervised access to the washroom during designated periods, and no additional amenities. 1 meal a day, Emily exclaimed, her voice rising. But we anticipated 3 meals. Indeed, you may have 3 meals daily, I replied with a sweet, measured tone. However, that option is part of the premium package, which costs the $2,800 I initially quoted. This is outrageous, David erupted. You're delusional if you imagine we'll agree to that. You are not obligated to sign, I informed them with unruffled composure. You are free to seek lodging elsewhere. In fact, I believe that would be the most beneficial outcome for all parties. Mother, Rebecca cried out, you can't just cast us out. We're your kin. I am not casting anyone out, I corrected. I am presenting you with choices. You may opt to pay the standard commercial rates for the amenities you desire. You may elect to pay for the essential provisions within your financial reach. Alternatively, you may explore arrangements better suited to your budgetary constraints. Martha began to clap, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Bravo! This is precisely the approach your sister needed to adopt. Unambiguous choices, equitable terms, and an absence of emotional coercion. Stay out of this, Rebecca, Martha retorted, her voice sharp. This is a family affair. You are correct, Martha acknowledged, rising to her feet. It is indeed a family matter, and a genuinely supportive family does not mistreat its elders in such a fashion. She moved towards the exit, pausing at the threshold to turn back to me. Mary, should you require anything at all, you know precisely where to find me, and if these individuals cause you any distress, do not hesitate to reach out. Here in this community, we look out for one another. Following Martha's departure, a profound silence descended upon the living room. I could sense their minds racing, desperately searching for a new tactic. Paul attempted to leverage guilt. Mary, your husband and I shared a very close bond. He regarded me as a brother. Do you truly believe he would approve of you treating his in-laws in this manner? My husband, I responded, imparted to me the value of self-worth. He taught me that genuine affection is demonstrated through deeds, not mere words. And crucially, he instructed me that tolerating mistreatment from others is not an act of love, but rather an exhibition of timidity. Robert resorted to veiled threats. Mary, I suspect you're underestimating the predicament you're creating for yourself. There are numerous of us, and you stand alone. It is unwise to antagonize your own family. His words, which would have once instilled fear within me, now served only to validate my existing understanding. These individuals did not love me. They needed me. And when their attempts to exploit my affection proved futile, they resorted to intimidation. Are you attempting to intimidate me within my own residence? I inquired, my voice possessing a calm that surprised even myself. It is not a threat, he hastily clarified. I am merely stating the facts. The fact of the matter, I countered, is that you arrived at my home uninvited, expecting complimentary provisions that are beyond your means. The fact is that when I requested your equal contribution, you refused, and the undeniable fact is that now, presented with fair and reasonable options, you have resorted to intimidation and threats. Emily began to weep, a performance of distress clearly intended to manipulate. I cannot comprehend such a transformation, Mary. My child requires stability, and you are essentially evicting us onto the streets. Your child, I rejoined, requires parents capable of meeting his fundamental needs without preying upon an elderly woman. If your financial situation precludes a vacation, perhaps it is ill-advised to embark on one. The children, who had been engaged in play in the garden, now rushed inside. "Grandma, why is everyone raising their voice?" the youngest inquired. A pang of sorrow resonated within me. The children were blameless in this conflict, yet their parents were employing them as emotional shields. "The grown-ups are engaged in a significant discussion," I explained gently. "Why don't you return to your play for a little while longer?" "But we're famished," one of the twins piped up. "Is the meal prepared?" I observed the adults in the living room. Not one stirred to attend to their hungry children. They expected me to fulfill that role, as was my custom. "Parents," I stated, "your children are hungry. In the kitchen there is rice and beans that you can prepare for them." "You're not going to cook?" Noah asked incredulously. "I prepared meals yesterday and the day before," I replied. "Today it is your turn to cook." "But we don't know how to prepare food," Emily protested. "Then perhaps it is time you acquired that skill," I suggested. "Alternatively, you can take the children to dine in town. There are numerous eateries available." David abruptly stood. "This is the final indignity, Rebecca. Pack our belongings, we are departing immediately." "Departing to where?" Rebecca asked, a note of panic in her voice. "We have no reservations anywhere." "We will find something," he asserted. "Anything would be preferable to remaining here with this altered version of your mother." I remained seated, observing their hurried scurrying as they hastily gathered their possessions. A portion of me felt a tinge of sadness witnessing the disarray, but a more significant part experienced a profound sense of liberation. "Mother," Rebecca said to me as they finalized their packing, "this is not you. I cannot fathom what has caused this change in you, but I sincerely hope you will reflect upon your actions today. You have fractured your family for the sake of monetary gain." "No," I replied, rising to face her directly. "I have reclaimed my inherent dignity and have learned to distinguish between family who genuinely cherish me and individuals who merely exploit me. You will come to regret this," she declared, her voice ringing with animosity as she departed. "When you find yourself alone and ailing, do not presume to seek our assistance." "I would much rather face solitude with my dignity intact than endure companionship devoid of respect," I retorted. One by one they entered their vehicles. This time there were no tears from the children, as they had evidently perceived that this visit was distinct. This occasion was marked not by lamentations or dramatic protests, but by the palpable resignation of individuals who had lost their preferred source of support. I watched them drive away for the second and final time, experiencing a sensation I had not felt in years: complete tranquility. That evening Martha joined me for dinner. She had prepared a hearty chicken stew, and I had a dish of rice with pigeon peas ready. We dined on my porch, gazing at the setting sun painting the fields, and discussed our gardening aspirations. "Do you feel content with your decision?" she inquired. "I feel liberated," I responded, the words resonating with a truth I had not known for decades. I feel truly free. 6 months elapsed, and my residence had genuinely transformed into a sanctuary. My garden thrived under my care. I had cultivated a modest circle of friends within the town and had commenced attending painting workshops at the community centre. My days were now filled with pursuits of my own choosing, rather than obligations imposed upon me. Rebecca would occasionally contact me, typically when in need of something, a loan, assistance with childcare, or a solution to a problem. I would listen with patience before stating, "I regret to inform you, my dear, but I am unable to assist with that particular request." Initially, she would react with anger, followed by pleading and then attempts at coercion. Now, she simply terminates the call. I have come to understand that demonstrating affection does not necessitate tolerating harm from another. I have learned that generosity does not equate to complete self-depletion for the benefit of others. I have recognized that true family members reciprocate care, offering as much support as they receive. And I have discovered an even more profound truth. It is never too late to reclaim one's existence, one's self-respect, and the inherent right to happiness. This morning I awoke to the melodious symphony of birdsong, prepared my coffee in my immaculate and organized kitchen, and stepped outside to tend to my plants, which are flourishing with robust vitality, much like myself. If my narrative resonated with you, consider showing your appreciation by sending a super thanks, which will enable me to continue crafting similar stories. Your generosity is greatly valued in advance. And what of you? How would you navigate such circumstances? I am genuinely eager to hear your perspectives, so please share them in the comments section. I am perpetually intrigued by your thoughts. Kindly also indicate where you encountered this story. Should you wish to engage with more life narratives of this nature, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Numerous other accounts await your discovery. Warmest regards, and until our next encounter.